there's no denying that the Mimic has a bit of controversy behind them. And by a bit, I mean it seems that it practically has caused almost a huge divide in the FNAF fan community. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a Team Afton and Team Mimic undertone in the fanbase ever since the canon to the game implications of this character. So before the game releases, I just wanted to express and share my own personal thoughts, concerns, and hopes about the addition to this character and all that it brings. I want to talk about the good and bad aspects, as well as try to address some of the main arguments that's being made, both in favor of or not in favor of this whole Mimic concept. First, I want to make it a point to mention this is not a hate on the Mimic video, but it's also not a nothing but love for the Mimic video. I don't want to make anyone feel bad or wrong about their own personal thoughts on the Mimic, nor do I want anyone to feel like their reason for approving or disapproving this addition is good or bad. Fanbases have a tendency to have way too much internal hate against each other, and FNAF unfortunately is no exception. At the end of the day, everyone has their preference and reasons for what they like or dislike, and I want to be respectful of that. I mean, I would want someone to respect my stance on it, and I don't want it to be a one-way thing. Respecting someone's opinions and preferences on something doesn't mean you necessarily agree with them, but that you made and or are making an effort to understand their reasoning and their point of view, and hopefully I can do that here. That being said, I do lean a bit more, well, concerned about the Mimic, but I will try to address both sides of points of view in the video. That being said, it's about 4 days from the Secret of the Mimic being released, so I don't have a lot of time to break this all down in a much more cohesive video. So apologies if things sound a bit confusing or repetitive, or the flow of sentences and topics are kind of everywhere. I'm just kind of thought-spurring to get my main points out, which is why my video footage also isn't gonna be all that interesting either, and I'll probably sound like I'm reading from a doc. But I know if I try to make this perfect and well done how I'd want, it's definitely not going to be posted before the game releases. So turn on your fans, grab your soda and foil-wrapped food, and let's jump right in. To start this, I want to say I don't inherently think the Mimic is a bad character. I actually think they're a pretty interesting character, and could have a lot of potential. I do think how they're implementing them into the story feels a bit forced, and at the expense of other characters. By this, I'm meaning other established characters' importance, intentions, reasons, motives, and just overall credit and what made that character unique. I'll explain why more later in the video, but right now, I'd like to talk about my own personal first impressions, starting from the first teaser till now. The first impression was a very misleading one, which made for bad first impression. We were greeted with the puppet's iconic song, one that the puppet herself is known for. The camera pans up to a box, and we know the puppet resides in a box. These two factors put together really gives the impression that we're about to see something related to the marionette, or the puppet. And expanding on a loved character and a game that focuses on them would be absolutely amazing. So of course excitement is high. And then we're greeted by, not the puppet, but something else instead. A clown? Circus baby? Then we're greeted with the next game title, Secret of the Mimic. Now, at this point, I'm aware of the Mimic and Ruin, but I haven't read the books, so I'm a bit caught off guard, but I assume it's just because I'm not aware of them from the books. This would honestly be no big deal. However, the part that was off-putting was the lead up to the character in this way. I think it wouldn't have felt as whiplashy if it didn't set up almost the entire vibe and atmosphere of the teaser to, well, mimic that of the beloved puppet. Now, I don't mind things being portrayed as something and then it switches gears. I think something like that can be impactful, but in this instance, I think it caused my first impressions of the Mimic to be dissuading, as it felt like more of a replacement than an introduction. Like it was like, haha, here's a game about the puppet, psych! This is a game about someone called the Mimic! Perhaps if they used another feature of Jackie's, or honestly just a different song, it would have helped mitigate the imposed feeling of, this is the puppet we're looking at. I will say I think there's a reason why they went with these similarities, but that will be discussed in the concerns section of the video. But right from the get-go, I can see both the puppet and a bit of Circus Baby being, well, teased in the teaser. But it's someone else entirely, and it just kept that sense of off-putting ever since. From there, it felt like we were getting another puppet or circus baby, even though we already have a long, lanky Jack-in-the-Box type character and a circus-themed girl who is a red-headed clown. Not to mention the faceplates we see the Mimic donning. This starts posing the thoughts of, is this supposed to be the puppet's origins? Or the design that inspired the Fun Times? More on this later, but this is where the feelings come in of these already established characters being upstaged by the Mimic. The Mimic being the reason for them existing, possibly? The feeling begins here of having these characters' uniqueness and credit of their story being theirs getting threatened in this way. Again, more on that later, and hopefully I can explain it a bit better. And I'll add that, from my experience with fandoms in the past, hearing something like, "To see the future, sometimes you need to understand the past," just invokes retcon opportunities everywhere. Doesn't mean that it is what's going on, but it's a pretty big indicator there's gonna be at least some shoehorning of something to make it fit, which is very concerning, especially when it pertains to something that's already a good story. Later on, we get some DLC that helps introduce us into this new story direction of the Mimic, and where my worries continue to grow. We are greeted again with the box and the puppet song, then a voice that's not recognizable as the puppet at all. We further learn that the Mimic is tied to this shop of sorts. Now, honestly, this was kind of exciting, because from my understanding, Henry was an inventor. So I'm thinking, oh, we're finally getting Henry backstory. We even see Bonnie and Freddy at the top, but from watching other people's thoughts on it, it apparently belongs to a guy named Edwin? Which, again, I haven't read the books, so it was interesting to learn about. However, it didn't help with my concerns, but rather kind of made them grow a little. There was a third guy involved now? If he makes the costumes, I thought that was William's thing. If he makes the animatronics or endos, I thought that was Henry's thing. This, indeed, was where I really feared the retconning coming in. Again, I'm not saying it is happening, but I can't deny it feels like it is. As more time goes on and more teaser trailers we get, the more fans point out, and the more worried and concerned I get with what it is they're pointing out. We've been waiting and so excited to finally get a game that focuses on the origins of Fredbear's Diner. But it turns out to be about some other guy's costume or toy store? And then we're still teased by the diner by Bonnie and Freddy on top of the building and posters of the diner throughout all the trailers. So there was supposedly this hyper-advanced robot that even surpassed the Glamrock's technology that existed in the 70s, but wasn't created by Henry, who was understood to be the skilled inventor who made these amazing revolutionary robots. The credit of that character detail goes to Edwin, it seems. It's pointed out that there are wires coming from the suits, and some say these might suggest spring locks. Again, taking credit from Henry. Others have pointed out body parts coming out of the suits, which poses a threat to William stuffing the kids in the suits being not his own idea, but his inspiration from maybe witnessing the Mimic's actions, giving that character credit to the Mimic and away from Afton. With more and more trailers coming out and information being revealed, and speculation and observations from other fans, it appears more and more that almost every aspect of origin of Henry and William actually stem from Edwin or the Mimic. That a lot of what we thought were just humble beginnings of just two guys wanting to make a business together were actually a bunch of stolen ideas and concepts, and even inventions that all belonged to someone else. Again, these are all just speculations of what we see in the trailers so far and what other people are saying that they point out from what they see in the trailers. Here is just a rundown of some of my concerns. Now, I understand the game isn't out as of yet, and there's a lot to be revealed, so these thoughts and concerns I'm going to mention are more hypothetical outcomes, just based off of what we already know and how it seems to other fans and to me, from what other fans pick out. So please, don't take anything I mention here as me saying it's facts, please. My concerns are these. Instead of Henry and William being the sole creators of their properties and business ideas, they both stole from Edwin. I make this point to say both because we already know William is shady and takes a lot of business ideas from Henry, so that's already an established dynamic for William. But Henry, though, just doesn't seem like that's something his character would do. Another concern is that this is where we're going to find out the origins of the puppet, taking away credibility from Henry making the puppet and it actually being Edwin's inspired creation. Circus Baby, and even all the fun times were inspired by Edwin's inventions. That William stole the ideas of even those animatronics. The concern that the spring lock functionality and hiding in suits is something that William got inspiration from witnessing the Mimic hide away in suits. And Henry thought of the spring locks witnessing the Mimic adapting to suits as well, inspiring the spring lock system, thus taking credit away from William and Henry for those specific character thoughts or traits. The Mimic is glitch trap. Please no, just please no. The Mimic is just going to be technology. There's not going to be a presence for a soul to give it its will and motive. I could see Remnant of Agony maybe playing a part, but from what it seems, the Mimic was just running on rogue AI to begin with, as with all the other inventions we see of Edwin's. Music Man, the cleaning bots, etc. This takes away of the main story plot. The robots are haunted by souls, and just making it another story about rogue AI, which has really been overdone before. I mean, there's been plenty of movies about rogue AI, and at least the souls haunting the machines actually gave it a bit of a twist, add a little more depth to the story. Now, I know in an interview that Daco had with Scott mentioned that he likes the idea of rogue AI just kind of going haywire and causing havoc, which is, it's not a bad story plot. I mean, if that's what he likes, that's cool. There's a lot of people that like that concept. But you also kind of had that with Glitch Trap, so I don't know why they decided to just kind of yoink him out of the story. I mean, he was a soul, but also kind of a rogue AI. He was kind of both in one. You had both dreams. You had it all. You had everything. Anyway, I digress. Another concern is that we already see there's chance that even the mediocre melodies possibly belong to Edwin as well, instead of Henry like we thought. Monty kind of makes sense to be at the MCM, since he is more out of place and, I guess, newer than the rest of the cast. But we also see on the Happiest Day minigame someone wearing an alligator mask. So, does this imply Monty was stolen as well? Though Monty's origins are less of a concern, seeing Mr. Hippo and even Happy Frog inside Edwin's MCN is a bit jarring. Again, taking credit away from Henry being their inventor. Edwin is going to be the one who have made the Pizzaplex. We can see traces of him from the staff bots in the Secret of the Mimic trailers, relating so much so to the staff bots that we see at the Pizzaplex, Music Man, and that Mr. Hippo ends up being in one of the security breach endings, I think? So, I don't know, I guess if it's all made by Edwin, it kind of makes sense that they're all there. And who else would have any sort of legal ties to the Fazbear IPs if not Edwin? Someone who worked with them in the past before, and possibly held some kind of rights to the IPs. I do think Mrs. Afton would have been an interesting choice for the building of the Pizzaplex, but I guess some guy who was never involved until recent games can take the opportunity on that one too. Sorry, Matt Pat. You had a good running theory for a while, bud. At the end of the day, anything and everything is going to have stemmed from either Edwin or the Mimic being first. The credit, the skills, the inspiration, the characters, all of it feels like it's going to link right back to them, and that's very, very disheartening. Now, I want to talk about possible outcomes that could possibly make this all work, and not just downright steal from every established character and story that exists so far. Number one is we have all been waiting for an origin story, especially a Fredbear's Diner. Focus on the diner as the main focal point, and sprinkle in hints about Edwin throughout, instead of vice versa, where it seems there's so much importance and focus on the Mimic and Fredbear's Diner is secondary. This current approach just feels like it's undermining the importance of what Henry and William had going on, and that all the real important stuff lies with the Mimic and Edwin. A bit of a slower implementation and introduction of Edwin being tied to the game line story would have at least eased some of the out-of-nowhere feeling and made it feel a lot better connected. Make Edwin Henry. I cannot stress this point enough. We already had a character who was an established revolutionary inventor, which is what caught William's attention in the first place to team up. The Mimic would work so well into the already established story if Henry was just Edwin, as a lot of us thought Edwin was a stand-in for Henry in the books anyway. On that note, I think in some of the books, there's a Charlie that has a twin who gets killed, or is implied that they get killed. This other kid could have been Henry's, aka David. This could have better yet tied in the kids to the Mimic. and to the rest of the books. Maybe perhaps it could have been Henry's first kid who possessed the mimic? Giving it good reason to call back to the puppet, they're both Henry's children. This is why they share a similar fate. This would have been an amazing twist, and good way to incorporate the mimic from the books, as well as keep the haunted by souls aspect of FNAF. And I don't know, maybe tied in some of the agony remnant instead of the actual soul? I still don't really know how the difference works between just regular remnant and agony remnant, but if you get what I'm saying, you get what I'm saying. Music Man belonging to Henry also makes sense because of the Fun Times designs, leaning to Helpy's designs. It would have made sense that William would have stole all these assets later on for sister location after they joined partnerships, since we already know that William likes to steal all of the invention ideas from Henry. Henry being Edwin would also make sense why there's a Mr. Hippo and a Happy Frog. This also leads into the MCM already having an entertainment hub, with the showroom area and birthday room. The mediocre melodies could have been part of the showroom, and Jackie could have been the first iteration of the puppet that we see in FNAF 2 later. It's understood that Henry kinda had his own thing already going anyway, which is, again, what caught William's attention in the first place. This literally could have been an introduction to Henry, and more story on this character that we honestly never really got before. Just give this man the backstory coverage he deserves, man. Give him the attention he deserves! Going about it this way, Henry would still get the credit, and not a third wheel Edwin. Honestly, a lot of my issues I have revolving the Mimic could be better if Henry was honestly just Edwin. Henry is such a beloved character that is never talked about, and this would have been a perfect way to tie in the book aspects, the already canon lore, the business growth and merge of Henry and William, the similarities and links to the other characters, souls haunting machines, it all fits. The main monkey wrench in this whole thing is honestly Edwin, and the fact that the Mimic seems to just be running solely on programming. But another way to approach this story is to say that Henry worked for Edwin before joining and teaming up with William to make Fredbear's Diner. This could explain where Henry got his experience, and his connection to later use Edwin as a contractor for events and such. Maybe it was Henry's first kid who got killed by Edwin's invention? Which still feels a bit Afton-y. Or perhaps maybe he created the Mimic and it did something to hurt Edwin's kids somehow. Either way, this does still give credit to Edwin for mainly Henry's beginnings, but it's not all-encompassing and overtaking as what's being portrayed now. William stealing from Edwin's inventions makes sense, and convincing Henry of the same could work too, especially if Henry was fired or quit to get away from the Mimic, or just bad memories. Although, I guess if he's fired, they wouldn't be able to use Edwin for contract work. But Henry quitting and going off to do his own thing could work, if he was just trying to remove himself from the environment. Anyway, this is just me thought sputtering about my hypotheticals and what ifs, but I think my main point of what I'm trying to say is getting across, hopefully, that the main focus of everything should still be on William and Henry, and Edwin and the Mimic secondary, instead of this flipped scenario where everyone's origins feels retconned to fit the Mimic in the current plot. Alright, so next, I want to talk about the divide within the fanbase, and why some fans really love the new story direction, while others not so much. I'm gonna try to be as unbiased as possible, but do know, like I said earlier, I lean more on the side of I don't like this, so that will come out a bit more, as I want to give my own personal outlook and reasons, but again, I won't imply anyone is stupid or a bad fan or wrong for agreeing with the people that do like it, just to clarify that. One argument is, you're an old or classic fan. I hear a lot of people saying, you just don't like it because it's new and you're stuck with your stuff from 10 years ago. This doesn't make sense to me, because I am a new fan. I didn't get into FNAF until a few months before Ruin was released. Yeah, I've seen FNAF pictures and merch through the years, but I never actually delved into it until the Security Breach era. I did, however, go back and play through all of the games, starting with the first. So, though I am a very new fan to the franchise, I can't say that it's my nostalgia clouding my judgment for the changes that are happening. One that kind of goes hand in hand with that first reason is we don't want anything new to happen with the story. But I don't think this is the reason why fans who don't like the Mimic are upset. It's not that we don't want to do anything new or take new directions. If that were the case, people would have hated Glitch Trap and Vanny. and they were actually very loved and underutilized. And a lot of people are upset that either Glitch Trap is gone or is actually the Mimic. Again, it's not even really the Mimic we're upset by, but it's how they're just shoehorning him into everything that has already been established. If you're going to take a new direction, you can do so without tinkering and altering past events. Now, I will say there's some people who didn't even like Glitch Trap, but this isn't really a video about Glitch Trap, it's about the Mimic, so that's a topic for another time. To which, on the topic of Glitch Trap, a lot of people who are for the Mimic, I've noticed, were tired of William always coming back, which is ironic. But what's even more ironic is that now that William seems to be nowhere to be found, you take out Burn Trap, take out Glitch Trap, take away almost every credit towards Afton, and yet people are excited in the comments of trailers saying, "Are we playing as William? Oh my gosh, it's Afton!" Like, do y'all want the man to come back or not? I don't understand, but anyways, moving on. Another reason is that it feels too much like Poppy's playtime. I will say, just so everyone who's watching this knows, I actually like Poppy's playtime. So it's not that I dislike Poppy's playtime, which is why I don't like that it's similar. Let's get that out of the way. I don't like that it's similar, not because it feels like Poppy's, but because it doesn't feel like FNAF. It doesn't really matter what else the game feels like it is. If it doesn't feel like the game that it claims it is, something is wrong. I looked at playthroughs and even played fan games that felt more true to the FNAF atmosphere or aesthetic than the Mimic does currently, even with the trailers. Now, if this was the only thing that felt off about the game, it wouldn't be so bad. Because I loved Security Breach, and that didn't feel like a FNAF game. I don't even think I would even consider it a horror game, to be honest. Maybe a thriller? And it had plenty other complications. But I still enjoyed it and was able to accept it as a new direction for the game, even if the vibe and atmosphere wasn't as good as the predecessors. Another argument on top of the Poppy's playtime argument is that Poppy's playtime is doing so good, and even maybe surpassing FNAF in some respects. So FNAF should follow inspiration from Poppy. I can see this being a good point, but again, my keyword here is inspiration, which is ironic considering Poppy's was inspired by FNAF. Now the roles have turned, which is fine, great even. How cool is it to have the thing you took inspiration from now taking inspiration from you? What an honor, I think. But I think it's taking too much inspiration, and that it plays and feels so much like Poppy that it's losing its touch of FNAF, which is bad. It's the FNAF feeling being sacrificed for the more Poppy approach, is what makes it not so great. But, like I just said about Security Breach, that didn't feel like FNAF, but I still enjoyed it. So, it feeling too closely like Poppy's isn't solely what makes it feel off. It's even the theme of Toy Store and whatnot that's also tied in with the Poppy feeling. If you're going to follow the main themes of something, don't also follow the same gameplay style or topics, or else it's just too mimicky. Another argument I see for people not liking the Mimic plot is that we either haven't read the books or don't like the books. I've read some of the books, but none of the Fazbear Frights books yet. Now, I know some others may have different opinions on this, but I actually don't mind when books and other media reference each other. I kinda like the feeling of finding hidden references and secrets being found in other forms of media that all tie into each other. It makes it fun! However, I do think when things like that happen, the secondary media forms should complement the main form of media the property is in. I always thought of the FNAF books as with alternate tellings of the stories, or just fun quirky stories set in a FNAF-type universe. The situation with the Mimic, though, is that I feel like it's really blurring the lines here as to what's canon to the story in the games, which makes it very confusing and overall feel like it doesn't fit in with the current story. Going back to what I said earlier in this video, if they approached the Mimic concepts as secondary than primary focus, I think that would have tied in the books better, and even made it a bit more exciting for those who have read the books to see hints of the story within the games. Also, referencing back to my they should just make Henry Edwin concept, it would more directly tie in the book and game stories together. That would have been pretty interesting, I think. I'll also say, they could have just done something like Into the Pit, and did its own game, focusing just on the story of the Mimic, but leave it as is, as its own universe, instead of messing with the one that we already have. Books can have multiple sequels and chapters to a single spin-off story. I think the same could be done for adapting those stories to games. Heck, I'd be down for a whole different branch of games that were just made around the book universe of Fazbear Frights and Tales of the Pizzaplex. You can have both without replacing or moving in on the other. Also, a lot of people are upset that they have to read the books in order to understand the game they're playing. This, I completely get how it can be frustrating. It's like saying I need to spend more money to buy DLC for a game to get the full story that should have been included with the mainline game anyway. Again, other forms of media should be complementary, not necessary to the main form of media being utilized to tell the story. The argument that the Mimic was or was not there the whole time. I know I see a lot of theories about how the Mimic has been there the whole time and we just didn't notice, and I give props to those theories for really seeing how this character can tie in to the already established lore. It's honestly quite impressive what people come up with. However, how I see the main story is anything and everything we've seen and experienced during FNAF 1 up into Pizzeria Simulator. I say this because to me, Pizzeria Simulator was technically the end of the story. So when I see things come up now featuring apparently extremely important aspects to the stories and featuring such important characters that they have their very own game dedicated to explaining them, it feels very retconned and forced into the story where they didn't really have a place before. Again, I don't mind expanding on the universe and background, adding additional info to an already set story if it really complements the story direction. This is just being done in such a way where it's kinda much, and I'll say it again, it feels like it replaces and takes away from other characters in the story that we already had set. New stuff should be adding to, not replace, change, or take away things. That's not complementing the story, that's retconning. And whether the Mimic being featured in this way is retcon or not, it definitely borderlines it, at least for me. Another argument that I hear why we may not like it is that this isn't Scott's idea, it's all Steel Wool. Obviously, it's hard to say what's Scott's idea and what's not. I think most of what's done now is mainly Scott's concept and overall general idea, but the way it's implemented or the other details of who and what does what, I don't think is... Referencing back the interview that Daco did about Security Breach, we can hear Scott explaining how vastly different Security Breach was compared to what we got in the final project. Now, I know a lot of what he said was communication issues between him and within the Steel Wool team because of COVID and all that stuff, but as someone who's grown up doing school, work, and all kinds of multiple person projects online, I find it really hard to believe that they had that much of a problem with communicating things. It's not that hard to check in and clear something up or ask for input and clarification. This is just my own observation here, but that interview sounded like Scott was trying to be nice and give Steel Wool the benefit of the doubt. Also, he's not gonna bite the hand that holds the rights to his IP, so of course he wouldn't say anything in a negative way about them, or what happened. Personally, I think once they realized things were that far off from what Scott originally had planned, I think they should have scrapped what they had and changed it to fit his original view, instead of going with what they already had. If Scott wanted just simple glimpses of Burn Trap scattered throughout here and there, they should have just redid everything and go with that, instead of having him debut in a charging station with purple smoke, as he stated. And yeah, I think once they realized that it was that far off, they should have just scrapped it and did what he originally envisioned. And fans should have been okay with the wait to get something Scott actually wanted, instead of pressuring the poor man and complaining when the project is buggy or glitchy when it came out and missing content. But I digress. Since hearing the interview and hearing how different things turned out, it's hard to actually really trust Steel Wool to follow what Scott's vision truly is and what he would have done himself. Then again, this whole thing could be all Scott's idea, down to the finest detail, and I'm over here looking like a clown, but again, that's just my own thoughts on the matter, and why I don't fully trust this is all Scott's intentional direction. Anyways, this is getting long, and the game comes out soon, so I'm gonna have to cut my sharing thoughts short and leave it here with what I have so far. Hopefully this gets my general thoughts, ideas, and little hopes out enough to where it makes sense and maybe clear up some things as to why maybe some people aren't as excited about this new story directions as others may be. At the end of the day, I think those, like me, who are a bit skeptical of this Mimic story, is that we really truly love the FNAF story we have, and we're just seeing things that, to us, feel like it might be altered to fit a new concept, and that's a bit scary and a bit disheartening. I'm not saying that those who are excited don't also love the story of FNAF. It may be that those who love it see these things differently, and that's okay. As of right now, the game isn't released, so it's hard to have any solid hopes or worries to stand behind. But no one on either side, I would say, is wrong or a bad fan for whatever they think or feel about it. With that, I'll wrap up. Do feel free to share your thoughts or feelings in the comments, but please be nice, don't be insulting, please. Remember that kindness and love for others can go a long way, but kindness and love for yourself can go even further. See you next time, guys.